three presenters tonight who are part of a program that is monitoring and trying to provide sustenance for overwintering monarchs that breed in Marin and overwinter in Marin. And as probably most of you know, they've suffered huge declines in recent years. And Mia Monroe is going to provide a survey of population trends and update. And Ole Schell and Audrey Fusco are going to describe current efforts to offer breeding options and overwintering support and the importance of native plants to those efforts. Ole Schell is the founder of the West Marin Monarch Sanctuary. He's an award-winning filmmaker and partner in the Orville Schell Farms. He grew up in Bolinas on his father's farm, and as a child witnessed annual arrivals of thousands of Western monarch butterflies, and was, as he will describe, concerned about the loss of those overwintering butterflies and created the West Marin Monarch Sanctuary. Audrey Fusco is the native plant nursery manager and restoration ecologist for SPAWN, the Salmon Protection and Watershed Network. She's created a school habitat garden program, bringing nature to school in conjunction with the Charlotte Torgovisky of Homeground Habitat Nursery. And the program supports the creation of native habitat gardens, including monarch way stations in schoolyards. And they also help kids propagate native milkweed and nectar plants. And Mia Monroe probably needs no introduction. Mia has spoken recently to us. She's probably the best known national park ranger in the county. She is still working with the parks and as the Marin County liaison for the National Park Service. But she doesn't do this, is my understanding, through the Park Service, but as a Xerces volunteer conducting Western monarch overwintering counts for a quarter of a century. So I want to turn it now over to Mia, who will do further introductions and provide an introduction to the whole program.
Thank you, Dave, for that wonderful introduction and overview. And I am so excited because the New Year's count of the Xerces Society's Western Monarch count just ended yesterday. And already the graph that Dave's going to put up is out of date because there is good news on the Monarch Western front. So Dave, whenever you put up that graph, as you mentioned, I've been monitoring monarchs officially for 26 years, but my story starts much earlier. And I only bring this up now because of an amazing article I read recently, and Ola and I have had a chance to become familiar with the shifting baseline theory of how many of us experienced monarchs when there were millions in the West, millions coming to overwinter in coastal California. And that's my memory. And that's what I'm working so hard for. I want that to return for us, for the monarchs, for the world, for our children and grandchildren. But the Western Monarch Thanksgiving count has been documenting the presence of monarchs in the overwintering sanctuaries along over 350 sites up and down the coast from Baja to Mendocino. And this got informally kicked off thanks to an inventory done in the early 80s by the Xerces Society, thanks to a World Wildlife Fund grant that allowed us to do a complete inventory documenting the presence in one way or another of monarchs up and down the coast of California. And monarch biologists already began noting the gradual decline, the loss of sites, and that gave birth to the Western Monarch Thanksgiving count to document, to monitor the population of Western monarchs at what's considered the height of the overwintering population at Thanksgiving. So the official count's been going on for 26 years now, but the information was successfully extended through the work of Cheryl Schultz, who went through many, many records and kind of reconciled the data collection, the observers, etc., so that we can safely say that once upon a time, in our lifetime probably, there were once millions of monarchs. But as I mentioned, already this graph is out of date because I have good news. The monarch overwintering population had another bounce this year. Those of you who've been listening in know, and you can see from this graph, there's been a gradual decline over the decades that this count has been going on. There's been a gradual decline. And then there was a steep, precipitous drop to an extinction vortex, a free fall. And this caused great alarm. And I'm sure all of you were very, very concerned. But as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service noted, while considering monarch butterflies as a possible candidate for the rare and endangered species list, no one waited to get busy to offer help. But anyway, back to my good news. There was this gradual decline, a steep precipitous drop, and then last year a bounce, not a recovery, but a bounce from less than 2,000 monarchs up to 250,000 observed during the Thanksgiving count last year. But this year, it was wonderful. Over 300,000 monarchs counted and observed at the Thanksgiving count. Well, that was pretty exciting. And I also have several other bits of good news. All three of us tonight are monitors, and has it been a roller coaster? We went out to begin observing. We were very excited because from a small handful of monarchs in 2020, 2021, 2022, we saw 2,500 at 4 overwintering sites in Bolinas alone. There were other sites that we saw a few handfuls in Muir Beach and Stinson Beach and at Fort Baker. But then the roller coaster plummeted and we observed none in Bolinas. And then we took another look and we found up to 500 at the Bolinas sewer pond site. And we found tucked deep in a ravine at a historic site in Bolinas, we saw 1,500. It was very, very exciting. So from the up of nearly 2,500 to a plummeting none, we then found more, and we went into the winter storms at a good place. Who knows how many are left now after the winter cold, wind, and rain has buffered and buffeted the coast. Well, the next, I don't know where we are on the slides. I can't see anything.
You're on the chart.
Okay, thank you. For some reason, my Zoom isn't showing anything. Oh, well. Dave, whenever you can go to the next slide, that would be great. The next slide, when it comes up, is going to be about something really, oh, here's Pismo. In 2 weeks, I head to Pismo Beach for the International Monarch Summit. And I'm going to be with experts from all over the West, all over the world, actually. And we're going to be learning about what possible causes of decline are, what possible solutions could be, from early emerging milkweed to year-round breeding. We're going to discuss impacts of tropical milkweed and OE. We're going to learn about the inland breeding regroupings and tagging recoveries. It's going to be very, very exciting. So I'll have some news to share. Now, Pismo is in the core part of the overwintering range, which we're identifying this year from Santa Cruz to Ventura. The monarchs have scattered, they're regrouping, it's exciting, they're holding on. So there's hope, even though in Bolinas and West Marin, our numbers are now quite low after our ravaging winter storms. In the central part of the core range, the monarchs are holding on. So look for a report. Now, Dave, if you go to the next thing, I will be finding many ways of sharing with you the news that we'll be learning. There will be tours, there'll be talks like this. We're going to have a special show at the Marin Art and Garden Center. There's going to be newsletter articles. The Marin Working Group gets monthly reports. We'll have a chance to show up with young people at the Marin Audubon Society planting areas. Audrey will share the way we're getting it out to the schools. There's going to be many opportunities to stay in tune with this rapidly changing story of monarch recovery, the solutions people are trying, the hope that we're offering for conundrums like the eucalyptus, etc. But our next slide is going to show the ongoing expansion also of monitoring efforts. I started off by discussing with you the Western Monarch count, which has us going out to the overwintering sites November through January. So anytime, Dave, you want to put up the next one would be great, because the monitoring efforts have expanded. Not only is it the Western Monarch count, but we have the Mystery Challenge, which shows the onset of breeding, the first generation. We also go to the International BioBlitz at the peak of the breeding season, which is July. We have INAT, which I hope all of you have on your phones. So the opportunities to monitor are expanding. One thing that was really exciting at Bolinas this year is we found a tag. It was tagged at a garden in Talent, Oregon. Took 3 months to make its way to Bolinas. So there's old-fashioned tagging, which is helping us understand monarch movement. And then also MODIS, which is a modern GPS tracking system. The stations are being set up, so we'll be able to get real-time migration information. Hopefully we'll be expanding tagging throughout the Bay Area next breeding season. So there's lots more opportunities. Other slides that are potentially up there for you to see is that our team also includes Stu Weiss, Dr. Stu Weiss. He's a local Bay Nature Award winner. I'm letting the cat out of the bag. He's going to be honored in March. He's a scientist, the Monarch Whisperer, and he's part of helping. There he is on the left with his hemisphere camera, and he's working in Marin with one TAM to study sites in the Marin Headlands, Fort Berry, and also coming soon to Bolinas to help us understand how to bolster the buffering capacity of an overwintering site to protect places from wind and rain, and also where to plant and where to open up to important sunlight. So we're hoping to bring his expertise into Marin much more extensively. So he does an assessment, comes up with a plan, and the money is beginning to flow to implement the plans, because the number one goal is to protect and enhance and do a better job in our overwintering sites. But we're going to hear now from people who are on the ground helping with this. And I'll never forget the phone call in February 2020 from Ole Schell, who was returning to Bolinas and wanted to do something to return the incredible, awesome sight of thousands of monarchs in Bolinas. He returned when there were next to none, and he didn't just wonder, he didn't just scratch his head, he didn't just say, is someone doing something? He is going to share with you the important efforts that he is doing in Bolinas and throughout West Marin to offer hope for monarch butterflies returning each winter to overwinter along our coast. But my favorite memory at the moment, Ola, is you and I there at Kale and Elm, thinking about what we would do if PG&E arrived to start cutting more trees. Would we hug the trees and protect them? Would we stir up the neighbors? What would we do? But thanks to Ola, knowing the value and protection of the sites by the trees, alerted people, alerted PG&E, alerted our supervisors, alerted EAC to step in, and that prompted a moratorium on trimming and cutting of the eucalyptus around the overwintering site there. So without further ado, because Ola's got a really important story and a great way to share it, here's Ole Schell of the West Marin Monarch Sanctuary.
All right. Thanks, Mia. Everybody can hear me. I am currently without power, so I'm using a combination of candlelight, some film lights, and a handheld light here. So hopefully it'll work. I'm on my phone. So yeah, like Mia said, I grew up here in Bolinas on a ranch. My dad was raising cattle when I was a kid. And in that time, we had what seemed like endless monarchs. And we just took them for granted. You'd go out and play and you'd see several hundred on a branch. And then I spent a lot of my adult life in New York City, and I moved back to California, back to the ranch, and noticed that there really weren't any monarchs anymore. And I saw what was something like 1 or 2 a year. And I talked to my mom a little bit. She said, yeah, the monarchs are gone. And the monarchs were so much like a part of like our ethos and our memories out here in Bolinas that it didn't really seem right. So I, tracked down Mia, called her up, and she put me in touch with the good people of Xerces. And I won't spoil the whole movie, but we're going to show you like a 7-minute short film about the project we're doing here on our ranch. And we made it for a Bolinas museum show we had on Monarchs, where we curated a lot of local artists. And in my room anyway, we curated a lot of local artists who had done work on Monarchs. And we had a section on science that Xerces and Mia and Audrey helped with. And then Elizabeth Weber, who I think is watching, had a whole room, had the large room for her beautiful photography on monarchs and the nectar plants that they need to survive. And we'll touch more on that later. But yeah, why don't we just show our little short film, Dave, and then I have some more remarks after that. Yeah.
Okay. See if I can find that. It disappeared. Oh, here it is. Here we go. Here we go.
So this was made about 5 months ago, and we'll update what's happened since then. But it'll give people a good overview. Yeah.
My name is Ole Schell, and we are here on my
Can't
phone,
see it.
which he started in.
Can you pause it, Dave?
And
Maybe so we can see it and then hear it.
And
There you go. Rewind it, will you?
Niman Schell Ranch. And they were two back to the land guys who had set out to create super healthy, free range beef. I grew up feeding the cows on these pastures behind me. And I have super fond memories of being a 5-year-old and driving the truck as my dad threw bales of hay out the back. And my feet couldn't even touch the pedals. But it was very exciting to me, but we were probably going about 3 miles an hour. So fast forward many, many years, I was on the ranch and I realized one year that I didn't see any monarch butterflies. And then I recalled my childhood here when we would have hundreds of thousands, millions, countless it seemed. I remember shaking branches and just a whole cloud of monarchs would come off, and it seemed like they were endless and nothing could ever happen to them. So it was quite shocking when I realized there simply weren't any more. So I started doing some research. It was deep in the pandemic, and all my research led me to the name Mia Monroe of the National Park Service and Xerces. And so I gave Mia a call and I said, hey, Mia, my name is Ola. I live on a ranch and I want to help. And she was like, yeah, sure. She must have gotten that call a lot, several times a day, well-meaning people who want to help but couldn't or didn't follow through. But I felt I was different in that I was in the privileged position of being born into this ranch where we had a water source, we had plenty of space, and during the pandemic, I had the time to take something on. So she had put me in touch with the good people at Xerces, And they came out and did a survey of our property saying you could plant 1,200 or so individual native nectar plants. And that could serve as a food source for the monarchs when they come to overwinter, because Bolinas is historically one of the major overwintering sites for the Western Monarch. And I was like, well, all right, I'll give that a try. So I took their list, bought hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nectar plants, and I went up in my car on a rainy day, and the guy was like, there's no way you're gonna fit that in your car. And I said, well, let's try. And we did. We fit like, I don't know, 500 plants in my car at one time. I cleared a massive amount of chaparral, horrible poison oak, coyote brush. Then we brought in Navajo churro sheep to keep the weeds down. With the water source deep in a drought, I started planting, and we planted hundreds and hundreds of these nectar plants. After that, we started getting more and more pollinator plants. We continued working closely with Mia Monroe of the National Park and Xerces, and then working with Audrey Fusco from Spawn in the San Geronimo Valley. We now have probably 500 or 600 plants in the ground. And my vision from the outset was to combine these native nectar plants with existing fruits and berries in a farming operation we have, which we've also expanded. The idea is it would be a whole cohesive system where we have hundreds of these native nectar plants, and then we also chose fruits and berries that can be consumed, but are also beneficial nectar sources for the butterflies. We have everything from seaside daisy to ceanothus to California aster, pomegranates, blueberry, raspberry, apples, pears, even avocado, figs. So we have a whole little operation here. We have already seen, with all the nectar plants, a huge uptick in bumblebees. We had a lot of volunteer bee plant which came up, which is native. And as a result, we have a massive bee population, from honeybees to bumblebees, and I've never seen so many bees in one place. We also do a lot of field trips with kids, with the local Bolinas school, and Xerces, and the Environmental Action Committee of West Marin. And then we did something pretty interesting. We partnered with a veteran group called Guardian Grange. And there's a guy named Mark who was an Iraq War sniper and Navy SEAL. He dedicated his life to bringing former soldiers to the land to work, to help with trauma and PTSD. So we brought in September 11th, or honored September 11th, by having Guardian Grange out and starting construction on this fence. Now we have big plans and hopes to create what's called a monarch corridor. We have all the 3 elements needed for a monarch corridor. We have water that they need to live. We now have the nectar plants, hundreds and hundreds of nectar plants here. And then we have a eucalyptus grove, which is historically a documented overwintering site. The eucalyptus grove could use some work to be kept up to once again become a desirable overwintering site. And there's a gentleman by the name of Stu Weiss who uses LiDAR imagery from satellites and drones, and basically works on the overwintering site by planting new trees to keep out wind, and then thinning out some of the existing trees to bring in sunlight, which is what makes a desirable overwintering site. So we're in the privileged position of helping the butterfly and creating food crops that people can eat. And we even are growing lemon verbena, and we're growing for Chez Panisse, which is an honor. And we have great ties to them from the Niman Schell meat days, so really nice family connection there. So that's what we have going on the ranch. If anybody's interested in hearing more, they can go to westmarinmonarchs.org, and you can reach me there. I show people around all the time. If people want to make a donation, they can. So reach out and come by, and we'll be here digging holes, planting plants, watering, and weeding, and battling the poison oak.
All right. So if I'm back, can you guys hear me now? So that was for a late spring show we had at the Bolinas Museum. So since then, I'd say we probably have 1,000 plants in the ground since then. And I don't know if you guys caught the section where we talk about trying to create a monarch corridor. So that was the dream before the overwintering season started, and we saw the beginnings of that start to happen. I would see the sort of the makings of a corridor where the monarchs would fly from our pond down into sometimes to the plants that we planted, the nectar plants to feed, and then down into this valley, which is a somewhat hospitable historical overwintering site. And what they want is the correct blend of sunlight and lack of wind. And the monarchs like it to be in sort of a bowl shape, which is what we have. So our goal is to create sort of a monarch club med, if you will, like a place that they can't say no to. So it's going to take some resources to have the aforementioned Stu Weiss out. And then also like management of the trees also could be expensive if we need to drop some of these, quite large eucalyptus trees. But we had a lovely day with Mia and Audrey, and a lovely sort of winter, clear, warm day. And we sat up on this sort of hillside and watched about, 25 monarch butterflies fly in and out, which was very heartening, to say the least. Mia mentioned the PG&E story, and that's another thing that might have a positive ending. But Mia mentioned that we went to Kale a bunch of times and did a count, and that's a historical overwintering site where we saw very good numbers there. I think it was like 1,000 or 1,200 or something that we counted there. But Mia also pointed out that as many sites in Bolinas don't hold the monarchs as well, because PG&E has been trimming trees and people are kind of like reckless around the trees that the butterflies need to survive. So there is more wind than there used to be in there. But we were so happy about the return of the monarchs. And then my mom told me one day, she said, you better go look over there because all those trees are tagged. And I was like, oh my God, the trees are tagged. But there's several twists of fate, which were like minor miracles, but also kind of saddening in a way. And I'll explain it. We saw that PG&E had tagged these trees. I happened to know the owner of the property who was willing to play ball for us to help the monarchs. So I said, hey man, your trees are tagged. And he was away for 6 months. And he said, sure, deal with PG&E, do whatever you need to do to stop them, to get a stop order on those trees. And I just by complete luck, 6 months earlier, met a woman at PG&E at a party. She was like a fairly senior person at PG&E, which is of course a behemoth of a company. And I had talked to her because Mia had told me she had previously dealing with PG&E over other issues. So I said, okay, let me talk to this woman. I explained that Mia sometimes needed to deal with PG&E, and she was amenable to helping. So I looked her up, and she told us how to make a report and said, just make a report on the general number, and we'll take it from the back end, from inside, and try and get a stop order. Meanwhile, I think Mia was doing some other stuff with the local government and the supervisors, but we were able to get a stop order on these trees. And something it like super affected me. Like I was so sad that the one place in Bolinas, or maybe one of two places in Bolinas, sometimes it was the only place that was holding these monarchs, just the world wanted to chop down those trees. And it was like, it really affected me that what are the odds of meeting this woman at a party, knowing the owner, like this 1 in a million that all those things happened, that we were able to stop it. And the way I say it is there's no monarch police, there's no board of people out there, there's no authorities out there trying to stop the monarchs. And I just thought, like, I'm just some unqualified guy whose mom told him that the trees were tagged. you know? And, you know, if people like Mia weren't doing something, or if we weren't lucky enough to met who we met, like we might have lost that site. So anyway, that was a victory. And what it is going to lead to is now we know the owner of the property, and he's agreed to let us manage that site. So ultimately what that will mean is maybe we have Stu come out and do a survey. And if you saw in the film, he uses all this high-tech stuff, LiDAR, drones, satellite imagery, photography. And then he makes like a report and a recommendation of where to cut to let in sun, where to plant a tree to block wind. So we want to do that there on the kale site, and then plant some trees and see if we can upgrade the site. And we want to do the same thing on our eucalyptus grove on our ranch. We've been, Audrey, me and I have been looking into planting bishop pines, because we believe those are the native pines to this area. Although there's not many on the ranch now. They may have been cut down at some point. So Audrey and I went and got a bunch of pine cones up on Mount Vision in Inverness, and if we heat them up, we'll get some seeds out of it, and hopefully down the road get some bishop pines that we may plant around our overwintering site in the eucalyptus. So one thing that was really troubling was every single place in Bolinas, including my own ranch, where the butterflies go, somebody wants to chop down those trees. So even in my own home, I'm having to negotiate those trees not being chopped down, and in all the sites in Bolinas. So what else have we have since then? Oh, if anybody wants to see that film, we can send it in the chat, because it's a little choppy when we just play it over Zoom like that. Since then, we're also gonna start a nonprofit. So for the West Marin Monarch Sanctuary, will be a 501c3. We're talking to lawyers about doing that right now. We have a board assembled, some of which are on this call, some of which are watching this Zoom. So let's see here. What else did I want to say? Oh, so this is going to lead us into, Mia said we're doing an event at the Marin Art and Garden Center. So I'll talk about that in a moment. Here's a very short NBC Bay Area piece on our project and on Elizabeth Weber, who's watching, and her work that was shown at the museum, which leads into Lizzie's show at Marin Art and Garden, which you guys are all invited to. So Dave, if you don't mind, we'll play that 3-minute clip.
The West Marin town of Bolinas moves at its own pace. In fact, residents removed the town's road signs so many times, Caltrans no longer puts them up. But for decades, scores of visitors managed to find their way here year after year.
We back up a bit.
Monarch butterflies.
And as a child, I remember seeing what seemed like millions of monarch butterflies in the trees flying around.
Ole Schell grew up on his father's cattle ranch here. The monarchs would return every winter.
We would go to that eucalyptus grove over there. We could shake a branch and thousands of monarchs would fly off it.
In the 80s, California recorded millions of monarch butterflies, but in the last several years their numbers dropped dramatically, which experts blame on wildfires, habitat loss, and pesticides. The worst came in 2020, when a count revealed fewer than 2,000 monarchs in the entire state.
What once seemed totally abundant was totally gone. So we have California aster in here.
Schell,
This is seaside daisy.
wanted to do something.
We have a verbena down there.
So he worked with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation to create an ideal butterfly habitat on the family ranch. He supplied the elbow grease, the land, and 1,200 plants to create what he calls the West Marin Monarch Sanctuary.
If you look around, there's hundreds of bees.
This past winter came the first test to see if the butterflies would like it too.
When I saw the first butterfly land on one of our flowers, it was a beautiful experience. And then more came. I remember chasing one down and filming it in slow motion and watching it over and over again.
Although their numbers were far below historic levels, the Monarchs did return.
Now it's just like a couple at a time.
Schell's results reflected a small statewide rebound that counted 250,000 monarchs last year.
But it's more than it was before we did this.
The struggles of the monarchs resonate with photographer and Bolinas native Elizabeth Weber, whose childhood here was lifted on the wings of the butterflies.
There were thousands and thousands of monarchs. So this is a photo of a chrysalis.
She now photographs monarchs as a gesture of remembrance and hope for their future. Her exhibition hangs on the walls of the Bolinas Museum.
The monarchs, they need us to respond right now to their decline. If we don't, we risk losing them.
In addition to butterflies, Schell's project now also attracts school tours and gatherings. He hopes it will bring more monarchs next winter and more the year after that.
The monarchs are sort of a magical creature in my memory as a kid. Hope to do our part to see a big rebound.
Joe Rosado Jr.
Well, there's a big old butterfly.
NBC Bay Area News.
Hey, all right. So I forgot to mention in the first film I showed, we talked about a grant we're getting from Xerces. So we did. We got a plant grant that they give away to a number of people who have space, the water, and the time and the insanity to devote to this. So we're getting just under 1,000 plants. We got them, picked them up a couple months ago, and Audrey has them now and is rooting them out in a greenhouse at Spawn. So what we're going to do is spread some of those out. Give some away. We're going to give some to Lizzie's mom, Marion, who might be listening. And I'll probably give some to my mom, and then we'll keep about 600 for the ranch. And we're going to go all the way down our hillside, all the way down to our lake, and plant native nectar plants for the butterflies. That goes all the way down to the pond to sort of reinforce the corridor. So we have a big planting day with the good people at Spawn on February 9th. Which will be action-packed, to say the least. So what else do I have here? Our plans for the future. For those of you who know what an NFT is, we're launching an NFT this spring to raise money, which is just basically like digital art that people can buy to support the project. And then at the Marin Art and Garden Center, you saw Lizzie in the NBC Bay Area piece. It's mainly Lizzie's show. But we will also have a like another science section, and then we'll show that film that you guys saw again at the opening. So we don't have an official invitation yet, but for those of you who want to write this down, it'll be March 18th, 3 to 5 p.m. is the opening, and then March 25th, 2 to 4 p.m. we're doing a panel, which will be me, Mia, Audrey, and I think Lizzie. And then there'll be another Earth Day event, which I don't have the dates for, but we will probably circulate all that information to everybody on this Zoom. Anybody who's interested can go to the project we have going on at the ranch is westmarinmonarchs.org. Check it out. You feel free to make a donation if you want. Let's see here. I think that's all I've got, but we were super heartened by turn of the Monarchs. And like Mia said, it really is a roller coaster, because at the beginning of the wintering season, we had this one day where we went down sort of towards Agate Beach, and the sky was just filled with monarchs. And it was just felt like such a great victory. And then we had a storm, and suddenly we couldn't find any monarchs anymore. And then we did find some. So it really is up and down. But the fact that we saw them return at all means that they can return. That means that it's not over. So thank you to Mia, Audrey, and Lizzie. That's basically our team of people who have devoted so much of our time to this cause. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. And we're doing what we can, doing everything we can. So Thank you for your time. And anybody can feel free to reach out to me if you want. Find me, it's my name at Gmail, OleSchell at Gmail, or contact me through the website for the project. Yeah, I do tours all the time. Anybody wants to come by, I pretty much never say no.
Ola, thank you for this real positive, action-oriented approach. And a few things that I was thinking of is your property is right across from that historic site that you and Audrey and I found the Monarchs.
That's right.
Sheltering in.
Yeah.
And there's also a number of people on this call who are working very hard too. I saw Alice and Tom, Kathy, Dana, Loretta, Kitty. There's many who are out there actively working in various parts of our county. So we've got a really great community. I mean, it was also really amazing because as we both diplomatically pointed out, the number one point in the Xerces action plan is to take care of the overwintering sites. And had we had this talk a year ago, the message would have been none of them are being taken care of. But the point now is that many of them are being cared for. And the help is on the way through Stu's assessments, through One TAM and the Park Service stepping up to implement those plans, you being open and available to that happening. But we saw the visible proof of why that is so important in Bolinas, because when the storms moved in, the Monarchs scattered. They didn't have a refuge. The overwintering sites couldn't hold them from the buffeting winds. And it was real scary. And we were even told that they were so desperate, they might even try to continue migrating south. But then we found them at two sites. We found them at the BPUD sewer ponds, a site that had been kind of designed to protect monarchs. And I see Tom on the call as he's assessing the eucalyptus there. And that's a site in Bolinas that has lost trees. So who knows what the future of monarchs are there. It's not just PG&E, it's just casual neglect that has lost the buffering capacity at all the overwintering sites, not only in Bolinas, Stinson, Muir Beach, all up and down the coast. So we now know we have to actively manage these sites. And another thing that really struck me, Ola, while you were talking, is the immediate thing everyone can do, and particularly along the coast, is plant nectar plants, native nectar plants, which of course is an important known message to this group here, the Native Plant Society, nectar plants. And we're going to hear about an active response to the Xerces guideline to only grow milkweed where it naturally grew. And we'll hear from Audrey about that proactive response in just a moment. So besides acknowledging some of the other people we work with, I saw Alice, Tom, Kathy, Kitty, Dana, Loretta, and others on the call. There's a lot of people, but those are a few that jumped out at me. I just want to reflect also on my early memories like you did, Ola, because once upon a time, I marked the turn of the seasons with the return of monarchs in the fall. The return of monarchs signaled that the days were getting shorter and colder, and they were returning from the inland breeding areas of the West. This is the classic story of once upon a time. They would breed inland, think Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, Yosemite, Arizona. They would breed multiple generations, building the population. And then as the days got shorter and colder, they would be triggered to stop breeding, begin nectaring up to build their body fat, and begin the migration. That was the classic pattern. But monarchs are resilient, and thanks to many of us, we are restoring the milkweed throughout the San Francisco Bay region. And monarchs this year and last were breeding throughout the whole year. And some of that's really good. Breeding during the breeding season of March through September is good. It's questionable if it happens in October through February. That's when they should be in the coastal areas protected from winter. But we're seeing a resilient species responding to opportunity. And I would like to welcome our next speaker, Audrey. She's with Spawn. She offers a lot of hope and opportunity on special public spaces, that's schools and other public lands. And she offers some very proactive, on the ground, educational, let's offer specific things to monarchs examples. And through her work and so many of the others on this call, we are tracking and watching the monarchs respond in ways that most of us are not familiar with, which is breeding throughout the spring and summer. And we have to be open to seeing new things and learning and taking also the precautionary principle of doing things that we know can be helpful and being conservative when we're not. We'll get more into that. But right now, we've got many good stories from Audrey, and she's a real leader in this campaign. And Ole and I are here to complement anything. And so take it away, Audrey. We're glad you're here with us tonight.
Okay. So I do see some questions have been asked in the chat. So I just want to say that we'll address questions after my portion of the talk is finished. Okay, so I hope everybody can see the PowerPoint okay. I'm going to talk about some of the programs that Spawn has started to help with recovery of habitat for monarchs. And again, I am the nursery manager and restoration ecologist for Spawn. Spawn stands for Salmon Protection and Watershed Network, and that's a local project which is part of Turtle Island Restoration Network. Turtle Island is a grassroots nonprofit based here in West Marin, and the main focus is to protect marine wildlife. With Spawn, we're working to protect the Central Coast coho salmon. And so we're mostly working in West Marin and the Lagunitas Creek watershed. So our mission statement for Spawn is, we are protecting endangered wild coho salmon in the forests and watersheds they need to survive. And this is a really key point. We're not just protecting the fish, but we're protecting the land. And we're really trying to reconnect ecological systems and create healthy ecological systems. Of course, one of the most important components of a healthy ecological system is the plants, which are the base for other wildlife, or for all life really. But also insects are the base of the food chain for other wildlife, for forms such as fish and for birds. So we are really trying to help support local insect populations. And of course, pollinators are one of the most important parts of our insect world in terms of helping with providing ecosystem services. So we really need our pollinators in order to create a wide diversity of plants. And Spawn Nursery is the nursery that I manage, and we are a restoration nursery. We started in 2006, and the main focus back at that time was to grow plants that would be used to stabilize banks. Again, we're working to do riparian restoration mainly, but because we've realized over the past few years in particular that pollinators are in decline, we have decided to really focus on benefiting pollinators. So secondary focus of Spawn Nursery is now to grow native nectar plants. And we are also just wanting to benefit all other forms of wildlife, not just fish, not just pollinators, not just the Western monarch, but again, we want to create healthy ecological systems. So we have a capacity to grow about 8,000 plants, and that's what we currently maintain in the nursery. And we are growing 100 different species of plants. And the plants, we're also always increasing our diversity of plant species that we're growing. But we are sticking to plants that are native to Marin County. And we are growing our riparian plants from seeds and propagules that we're sourcing ourselves from the Lagunitas Creek watershed to preserve genetic integrity. And one important thing about our nursery is that the nursery and our habitat restoration planting events are really powered by our volunteers. We have dedicated volunteers. They actually started the nursery in 2006, and many of the same people who started the nursery still volunteer regularly every single week and help me with collecting seeds and propagoules. And I really couldn't do the work that I'm doing without the volunteers at Spawn. Back in fall of 2019, when the monarch population declined to about 30,000 butterflies, I realized that I wanted to do something to really try to support the Western monarch recovery. And so it was at that time I started to read and learn about this phenomenon called insect apocalypse. So this is just some information that I pulled from the Xerces webpage. They have wonderful information on the Xerces website, including plant lists and all sorts of information. So I do recommend that as a resource and one that I use as well. So here, according to the information I pulled from this blog, fewer than 1% of invertebrate species have been assessed for whether they're considered threatened in terms of total biomass. And in terms of species diversity, we do know that insects are really facing a large decline. So there's still a lot of research that's being done on this, but there is a sort of a famous term called the windshield phenomenon, which describes this impact that has been noticed over the past 100 years, that as people go out and they drive in their cars, less and less insects are showing up on the windshields of their cars. So we've all kind of noticed this. I think even I myself over the past few decades have noticed this. And there's a lot of facts that, are out there about the insect apocalypse, but I do just want to make the main point that we do know that insect populations are in decline across the board. So with that in mind, I do know that one of the best ways to boost native insect populations is to plant native plants. And I always do try to promote supporting the right type of plants for the right place. So when you're thinking about what to plant in your area, think the way that, plant communities are sort of the way to think. And that's the way that I make decisions about the gardens that I work with. So with Ole's project, for example, we put in a lot of plants that would belong in a coastal scrub type ecosystem because that's where he's living. And with our school garden projects, which I'll talk more about in just a minute, what I do is look at conditions at schools, and then I sort of make my plant selection based on what the environment is and what this very specific location is that we'll be planting in. So these pictures were taken at Glenwood Elementary, which is in San Rafael. And this school is just an open area, very sunny. We transformed a weedy strip of land that was in front of the school into a monarch way station. This was the very first garden that was created through our Bringing Nature to School program. And this program was started as a partnership between Charlotte Torgovitsky, who runs Home Ground Habitats Nursery in Novato, and myself and Spawn. And what we decided to do was create habitat gardens that would support wildlife at schools. And we decided to start this program because, first of all, we wanted to give students the opportunity to do hands-on learning in nature. And second, we really wanted to provide better habitat for wildlife at schools and let students see monarch caterpillars, for example, in their own natural environment. I know that there have been rearing programs at schools for decades, and that's no longer actually even allowed by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we are now providing an alternative, which is let's plant the plants that we need in order to attract the type of wildlife that we want students to see. So what we did was plant a monarch way station at Glenwood. That was our pilot school. And we did this in March of 2020. And we planted this garden. It just happened to be aligned with the very last day that school was in session prior to the pandemic shutdown. So this was in March of 2020 that these students that you see in this picture are planting their garden. And a lot of students told their teacher that they were just thrilled that they could do that on the last day of school. I think it helped sort of keep the students calm and gave them something really positive that they could do and something they could look forward to seeing grow and change and evolve over the next year as they went back to the school and met in small groups. And the picture off to the right, you can see that there's a caterpillar that's on native milkweed. That's obviously a monarch caterpillar. And this particular school has been a magnet for attracting monarchs and attracting caterpillars. So students have been able to see caterpillars grow up over the past couple of years and go through the process of metamorphosis, which has been really rewarding. And so far, we have now created 6 different way stations with schools, including Neil Cummins Elementary, which Dana Swisher, who's on this call, is the partner teacher who helped me with installing that garden with her 4th graders last year and has totally taken charge of doing all the maintenance and follow-up, and even contacted me to ask me for more milkweed and more nectar plants, which I was very happy to give her this year. And again, I'm just looking at these schools and seeing that there are very different conditions at these schools. The Bolinas Stinson School, for example, is right on the coast, and it is not recommended to plant milkweed along the coast because that interferes with the overwintering pattern of the monarch butterflies. Their behavior is to be in a reproductive diapause. They need to conserve their energy during the winter time. So it is not helpful to add milkweed to coastal areas. So the Bolinas Stinson School has a 2,300 square foot garden, which is full of fall, winter, and early spring blooming nectar plants and does not contain milkweed, whereas the Glenwood Elementary, which is in San Rafael, not too far from Chinatown, does contain milkweed and also a ton of nectar plants. And the nectar plants in San Rafael, Corte Madera, Sausalito, and those areas, they tend to be fall and spring blooming nectar plants. And I'm not trying to focus so much on getting winter blooming nectar plants in as I am in a place like Bolinas. So yeah, I would just always plant for your area and think about when monarchs are migrating through your area. And then we also have several more schools that we will be working with, including Marin Academy, Strawberry Point Elementary in Mill Valley, Linwood Elementary is preparing their ground to do some plantings in the fall. And then also in this winter, I will be working with Glenwood Elementary to plant out about 200 more milkweed and nectar plants. The sign off to the left is a sign that was created by our very own Laura Levitt just within the last month. And so this is a garden sign that is weather resistant and will be staked and added to all of the school gardens that we're creating through the Bringing Nature to School program. And then the picture off to the right is a picture of a monarch butterfly on a milkweed, narrowleaf milkweed, again at Glenwood Elementary. And that was taken by Alice Kaysen, who's, I believe, also here with us. And then here I'm switching to a slightly different topic, which is that I have a school propagation program as well, and we're growing narrowleaf milkweed with students. Glenwood Elementary just happens to be my kind of pilot school for a lot of these monarch projects. And the reason that is actually is that when I was looking with Julie Ryan, who's the teacher that I work with at Glenwood, at creating a garden, we were not initially thinking for sure of creating a monarch way station, but what happened was, as I was walking around the land with Julie, I noticed that there were monarch butterflies flying around, and I saw several in this one school visit, and that's when we decided to plant a monarch way station. At the same time, we thought it'd be fun to plant more milkweed in the marsh back behind the school. And so in February of 2021, I sowed milkweed seeds with these students. This was just an extension of a school propagation program, which has been running through Spawn Nursery since 2016. I'm also working with other students to grow redwood trees and working with students to grow riparian plants. But now I've shifted my emphasis really to sowing milkweed seeds with students. It's very rewarding, it's easy to grow. And the students just take care of the seedlings themselves through the whole spring semester after we sow seeds at their school together. One thing I want to say about sowing narrowleaf milkweed and propagating it is that I have written a handout that's really detailed about how to grow narrowleaf milkweed from seed, and also that tells the conditions that are appropriate for planting narrowleaf milkweed and how you basically get it started, either by seed or by plant in the ground. And that can be found on the Spawn Nursery website. So I will show on my last slide a link to the Spawn Nursery webpage, which has a bunch of informational handouts, including one on how to propagate narrowleaf milkweed. One piece of advice I have really is that you always cage any narrowleaf milkweed or any type of milkweed that you're propagating. It seems surprising, but rodents actually have the capacity to eat a narrowleaf milkweed, and I think pretty much all milkweed species. So I always cage milkweed when I grow it. It typically germinates within 3 weeks. You can see a picture off to the right of narrowleaf milkweed that's recently germinated. And I do want to mention that Charlotte, along with being our Bringing Nature to School program partners, she also supports Spawn Nursery in many ways, including donating very generously a lot of milkweed seed for this program. So we have grown milkweed for 2 years now with schools, in 2021 and then 2022. And in 2021, we grew with only one school, and we grew 200 plants just with this one school. So in 2022, I decided to grow 2 schools and double my target to 400 plants. And we were successful. We actually grew about 600 plants last year, and I ended up giving away more than 100 to students at schools because we grew more than what I'd anticipated. But we did meet our target. And when I do the narrowleaf milkweed giveaway program, which is the way that I give out the plants we grow with schools, what I do is I actually offer to give these plants away starting November 1st. And I still have some plants left for this year. So I have about 150 that are still reserved to go to school projects, but I have close to 100 plants left for giveaway. I'm limiting the giveaway to about 5 plants per person. And so do contact me if you're interested. One thing I'm trying to do is get more milkweed out into local environment. And so we're just giving these plants away. But the other thing that I'm doing is I have a program called the Tropical Milkweed Trade-Out Program. And the Tropical Milkweed Trade-Out Program is very straightforward. I'm just asking people to take a picture of their tropical milkweed, uproot it, and then come into the nursery and pick up plants to substitute out for tropical milkweed. For those of you who don't know, tropical milkweed can be harmful to monarchs because, for one thing, it carries a really high load of OE parasite, which is a protozoan parasite that does attack all forms of monarchs, so at all life stages. This parasite can be harmful. And another thing that tropical milkweed does is it alters the behavior of migrating monarchs. So as monarchs are migrating through East Marin in the fall, if they come across the tropical milkweed plants, which are still growing and do not go dormant like our native milkweed plants do, they may decide to mate and lay eggs even as late as November or December. And in that case, the caterpillars will not survive the cold temperatures. Sometimes people take them inside their houses to try to rear them. That creates a whole nother set of problems, such as food shortage. There's typically really not much milkweed around during the winter time. And Mia and I had to go through this really difficult winter in 2020, 2021, where we had a lot of people writing to us and asking us for milkweed to feed their starving caterpillars that they'd brought inside to rear because they had caterpillars show up on tropical milkweed plants in the wintertime. We're really trying to discourage that from happening. We don't like to tell people that we don't have any milkweed, but we really don't. And nobody wants to see monarch caterpillars starving. At the same time, if adults are breeding during the wrong time of the year, what happens is that they typically lose a lot of energy, may not ever make it to the coast. So we really just want to try to preserve the migratory patterns. That's what scientists have determined is the best way to handle this crisis of lower populations. And so we're just encouraging people, if you do have tropical milkweed, trade it out and get native milkweed. I've got native milkweed for you. And if you can't do that or don't want to, then please do cut it back in the fall. Tropical milkweed. So here is sort of some of the details of the initial milkweed giveaway program. Basically, more than 80 plants have been donated to school gardens. More than 100 have been given away to students. We even gave some away to teachers this year. And I've also given away to nursery volunteers and other people that are members of SPAWN. But again, I have about 100 plants left for giveaway. So again, I just sort of talked about this, but tropical milkweed encourages adults to breed in the winter, alters their migration patterns, adults lose energy. They often don't survive the winter. So these are serious problems, and there's a good reason why tropical milkweed is now banned from being sold in Marin County by nurseries. I do encourage people to plant narrow-leaf milkweed as long as you are in the right zone to plant milkweed, which is 5 miles or more from the coast. And I will also mention one thing about SPAWN and the way that we're doing our plantings. And one of the reasons why I'm giving away this milkweed as opposed to saving it for our own project sites is that I work in the San Geronimo Valley on restoration. And even though the San Geronimo Valley is more than 5 miles away from the coast, there are no wild milkweed populations in this area. So it's a little complex, but I'm in what's considered to be a gray area where we're doing our restoration project sites. So I've decided not to add milkweed to our project sites. I don't want to put milkweed in a place where it doesn't belong. And it does not really belong in coastal areas. There are no wild populations there. So again, if you have any questions about whether or not you're in the right zone to plant milkweed and you want milkweed, just feel free to reach out and send me an email, audrey@churn.net. I asked people who were participating in our tropical milkweed trade out program to pull out their milkweed and take pictures of the uprooted plants, because I did not want people to bring their plants to the nursery. This is for another very good reason. There's aphids typically that often grow on tropical milkweed. And in fact, it's the even worse problem on tropical milkweed than on native milkweeds, because as with the OE parasites, these aphids do not have a time period to have their life cycle disrupted on tropical milkweed because it does not go dormant, unlike our native milkweeds. So I just asked people to send in pictures. Here is a list of the program participants from our pilot year, fall 2021. I did not add 2022 to this slide because I'm still giving plants away. But the first year of our program, 200 plants were given away, and the breakdown you can see here. Some plants were kept by the school that grew them, others were taken by volunteers. A lot of people participated in our trade out program, which was more heavily advertised the first year through EAC, who had an educational exhibit on monarchs at the time of the giveaway. And yeah, also lots were given away to different schools and community projects. So here is some program results through 2022. We grew more than 600 plants. I've worked with more than 120 students, I'm sure at this point. 400 plants were given away. Still have some available, still have some on hold for school projects. And we've removed at least, or encouraged people to remove at least 50 tropical milkweed plants. So here's some conclusions of the programs that we've been working with. Through Xerces, through their Habitat Kit program, which is the giveaway program that Ola mentioned. He's also received plants through Xerces, through this Habitat Kit program. SPAWN has received, I think, around 1,800 nectar plants now, because we received 1,200 the first year that we planted Xerces Habitat Kits at our site, which was this past winter. And we received another 600 riparian wildflower plants to go at our Tokoloma site. So we're planting at both of our or actually 2 out of 3 of our major project sites right now. And so we've added more than 1,200 nectar plants, more than 600 going in the ground this winter as well. We've also planted 6 new way stations, and we're going to be planting 3 more major kind of way station or garden project sites this winter. And we already have a couple of schools who've signed up to add gardens to their schools next year as well. Growing narrowleaf milkweed is easy. 4th graders can grow it, and it's just a pretty straightforward plant to grow. And we are expanding our propagation program this year, and we're not going to stop at milkweed now. We're going to include a lot of nectar plants, including California aster and California goldenrod. And then here's the most important slide for all of you. Here is just a list of ways that you can support monarchs in your own yard. One is plant fall, winter, and spring blooming nectar plants if you live within 5 miles of the coast. Definitely plant milkweed if you can, and fall and spring blooming nectar plants if you live more than 5 miles from the coast. One note that I should say on milkweed is it does best in wet areas that have sun. So if you have a property that has a swale or a ditch or something like that and is in sun, that's the best place to plant your milkweed. And if you don't, see if you can try to create those conditions. Sometimes you can dig out a swale and drain off a slope and put your milkweed in that little point at the base of the slope. That's the perfect place to put milkweed. And monarchs really need protection from sun, wind, and predators. So do plant grasses, or if you're in a wet area, you could plant sedges or rushes, but do make sure that you have some sort of ground cover around your nectar plants and milkweed in order to protect the butterflies. This is so obvious, but I do have to say it. Do not use pesticides or herbicides if you want to try to provide habitat for butterflies or pollinators in general. And kind of a fun tip is if you watch out for when monarchs migrate through, and when you know they're in your area in the fall, like September, October, put out a bowl of water for them. I like to use a ceramic garden kind of saucer, and it's red. And I just encourage you to think about what you can provide to monarchs. What do they need at the time they're passing through your area? September and October are really hot months. And I put always a twig, and I also stack up some rocks in my ceramic dish so that there's a little perch or a landing pad for butterflies and insects. So that's important. And then we already talked about this, but if you can trade out your tropical milkweed for native milkweed, that's a great thing to do. If you can't, cut back your tropical milkweed in October. And also check in the winter, because it might start to grow again. You may need to cut it back several times through the winter if you have tropical milkweed. And then here's just a few suggestions for nectar plants to add for monarchs. They really need large clusters of flowers, not small flowers. But California aster, California goldenrod, grassleaf goldenrod for wet areas, seaside daisy for coastal areas, California lilac just about anywhere, pink flowering currant also just about anywhere, are good kind of late fall and winter blooming plants. And I have also written a locally native nectar plant list, and it is available on our website. So that is listed here at the bottom of the slide, seaturtles.org/native plant nursery. So please do check the website out and look at the handouts that have been put together. There's also handouts created for different types of plant communities. So recommended planting list for, say, if you live in an oak woodland, or if you live in chaparral, or if you live in, whatever type of native plant community you live in, there is a plant list suggestion for you. So that is the end of my slides, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I think we're ready to take questions.
There are quite a few questions in the chat. The first one is from Larry, who asks, where do the monarchs come from that go to Bolinas?
So that's a really good question, Larry. And the monarchs that come to Bolinas and other coastal sites come from the Western United States, and from tagging, we've learned that many of the monarchs overwintering in Bolinas come from Oregon and Washington. So we kind of are on the Pacific Northwest Flyway, but further tagging might help us understand if we also get monarchs from Idaho or Northern California or Ukiah or Tahoe. We don't really know, but the Western monarchs overwintering along the coastal part of California, the Western population is west of the Rockies in general. So I hope that helps. Dave, you kind of suggested that we have a 9 o'clock time, and I just wanted to use a moment to highlight that there's a number of other very important efforts going on in Marin. Marcia Basala has an important innovative program to offer hope to monarchs through her median plantings in Novato, and we all need to really support creative ways of tucking habitat in like that. Bonnie Morse has an incredible garden going in at Dominican, can hardly wait to see. Ed Newt and Marin Audubon have offered habitat along the bayfront and are welcoming TAM students to help with planting. We have Alice Kaysen and the amazing education and plant propagation that she's doing through Master Gardeners. Paul De Silva with his biodiversity work and encouraging other efforts. And of course, our host nonprofit, Marin EAC, Marin Environmental Action Committee of West Marin, that hosts the Marin Monarch Working Group. And I put a chat message, send me a message if you want to be on the free mailing list. You get invites like to the Marin Art and Garden Center programs coming up that Ola mentioned, planting days, links to important articles about the many controversies going on, tropical year-round breeding, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a real good way to stay in touch. So those are just a few of the things that I saw in the chat while we have a moment before 9 o'clock. Did you see other questions you wanted us to address right now, Dave?
Yeah, there were some questions about the specific trees that monarchs overwinter in. First, about why do they choose eucalyptus, and what role do eucalyptus play, and what did they overwinter in before eucalyptus were there? There was some mention of bishop pine, but are there others? And why were those chosen, if we know?
So the bottom line is we don't know what the monarch biology, the life history was 150 years ago, before eucalyptus were planted extensively along the California coast. We think that the primary overwintering areas were kind of the core areas they are now, the range of the Monterey pine and Monterey cypress. There are a few examples of monarchs overwintering in redwood and sycamore, not too many, but we don't really know yet. We don't have records from indigenous peoples. We don't have mission records. We just don't know yet. But what we do know is that when the eucalyptus was planted up and down the coast, monarchs opportunistically found a tree in the right area, in the right places that they could hang on, and possibly the overwintering range expanded. But because we do know that when offered Monterey pine, Monterey cypress, redwood, they favor it. That's why we're looking at locally native options like bishop pine to transition to, or redwood when it's the native tree. We're trying to look at it. But right now, it's really hard for this park ranger to say this, but the eucalyptus that monarchs favor, we urge protecting as a lifeline until we kind of know what's next. So I hope that helps.
It looks like, Mia, you've answered a number of these questions in the chat itself. I'm trying to find ones that you haven't.
Well, someone asked about why it's illegal to rear. And it has to do with some of us kind of getting carried away and planting tropical extensively, turning our garages into breeding areas, and overriding the natural impulse to migrate and the buildup of disease. So right now, while we kind of do a course correction, breeding and rearing and moving monarchs around is illegal.
Yeah, the question about showy milkweed. At one time, both narrowleaf and showy milkweed were said to be, useful and good local plants. And you've only talked about narrowleaf milkweed. What's the status of showy?
Audrey, do you want to tackle that, or do you want me to?
So yeah, showy is native to counties that are nearby Marin, but it's not actually considered to be truly locally native to Marin County. So there's some differences in historical records, and we're not 100% sure that it wasn't native here in the past, but we don't have any wild populations of showy milkweed here in Marin.
Okay. Does anybody who has not put a question in the chat or not had it fully answered have a question they want to ask in person? If so, feel free to unmute and ask it. Okay, not seeing any. Let me just say we are.
Dave,
Yes.
I just wanted to say that one thing that Audrey and I talk a lot about is how to share with people where to plant milkweed. And what I've learned is that we all get it in different ways. Some people want a number, like Audrey's offering 5 miles. Some want topographic, like on the east side of the ridge that separates inland Marin from coastal Marin. So inland Marin is fine. Some people need place names like San Rafael, Novato, Larkspur, Tam Valley are okay. And what we go with is the tool offered by CNPS, which is Calscape, to plant milkweed where it naturally once grew. So I know it sounds like we're throwing out several guidelines, but we're just trying to get across that you should not plant milkweed in the coastal area where it naturally did not grow. That's where the monarchs overwinter. And there's many reasons. We don't want to disrupt the overwintering phenomena. We want monarchs to be able to make it through the winter. We want to discourage the buildup of disease. And of course, the bottom line, as Audrey so eloquently said, we support the restoration of native natural habitats and to restore the biodiversity of our systems. That's the basic core of it. It's complicated, but thank you for kind of putting your mind around some of these different guidelines. It's such an honor to work with Ole and Audrey and all the others. I see so many of you who we work with and support and are doing so much. And please join us at Magic in March when we have our wonderful show up. Thank you for the invitation tonight.
Thank you.
Thank all three of you for a wonderful presentation. It's so good to have some positive news after all of the negative and bad news, and to know that there are things that can be done that work.
It's amazing. This bounce is so encouraging. It's just a bounce. It's not a recovery, but it really is all of us rolling up our sleeves to do what we can. And the fact is we're doing it.
Well, thank you again. And we don't have a speaker pinned down for next for February, but stay tuned. You will hear about it through the website or through email. So thank you again for coming tonight, and we look forward to seeing you in February.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye. Bye.